Now that we have wrapped our reed, if you put it aside, be sure to re-soak it for maybe around 20 minutes so that the bark is nicely saturated. But we're ready to scrape. And the first thing I'm going to do is take my knife and I'm going to scrape just the very top, right at the fold. And this is only to be able to facilitate clipping it just ever so slightly so I can get the plaque in there. This is not a particularly important scrape, but do not accidentally clip off the sides because you never know if you might need them. So it's a lateral scrape across the top. And I take my single edge razor and I put my cutting block there. And then just on the very end, I raise this up just a little bit, and I'm going to do a slightly rolling motion with my single edge razor just to open up the top, as I said. There you go. Okay, so that's that. Pretty easy. I'm going to insert my plaque, and sometimes I will squeeze ever so slightly the sides of the reed just to make sure that there's no contact with the tip of the reed against the plaque. So now the plaque's in there. We're ready to go. Okay, get my cutting block out of the way there. So here we go. And I'm going to take this knife and I'm going to right now just scrape off the bark. To scrape the bark all the way down. Be careful at this stage be careful not to get too close to the very sides. Those are actually called the rails. If you do end up seeing the various charts out there about what the reed looks like, you'll see that they have little lines of bark, and those are called the rails, and they might actually list them on those charts. In any case, you just want to scrape the cane off, the bark off, and that's about it. Okay, that's step one, you could say. Now I'm going to get serious, and I am scraping now the back of the reed. Most people start with the tip. I, however, have found that if I start at the back, there's just something about it that gets the reed vibrating a lot sooner in the whole process. And it's a very comfortable way to start making the reed. So what I'm doing is I'm thinking in terms of quadrants, 4 quadrants, so 2 on each side, and I'm scraping out what we call the back, and it's just a kind of a oval shape to about the midpoint of the reed. So roughly from, let's say, 3 to 4 millimeters from the thread to the bottom of the back of the reed, up to about here. And you can measure that out if you want. I'm eyeballing it based on the overall length. My finished reed is going to be around 70 millimeters. The tip is going to be around 3 millimeters long. The heart area is going to be around 7 or 8 millimeters long, etc. So that's what I'm doing. So I'm making these 4 quadrants of the reed. And you can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The idea of a reed that's bilaterally symmetrical is very useful. We want approximately everything to be pretty even. So what I'm doing here, just by virtue of creating this back, is that there's going to be a little bit of a spine through the middle part of the reed. Let's see if the camera can pick that up. I have a dial indicator, otherwise known as a micrometer, and I can measure the very middle part of that back. And it doesn't matter how thick my cane is, if it measures out at 0.40, or rather 0.40, I'm usually really happy with that. I won't do that right now. I can just do it by feel. just by experience. Anyway, that's the back of the reed. So now I'm already ready to do the tip, believe it or not. And I'm just leaving the middle part, which we call the heart. I'm leaving that alone for the moment. I'm going to insert the plaque. And the tip, as we know, is by a long shot the most critical part of a reed. And with the initial scraping of the tip, my goal here is to not destroy it in any way. That means taking cane off by accident anywhere from the sides of the tip or the tip of the tip. And scraping slowly and meticulously here is very helpful. Take your time when you are scraping the tip. Avoid mistakes. They're very hard to correct, and usually they end up causing more problems. And so you can take cane off very evenly from the very top, so just straight away. But however, what I like to do is I like to make a slight inverted U. The inverted U allows for a little bit more tip vibration, which will in turn allow for a little bit more heart vibration, which is the essence of our reed. And the heart is where we find the balance, the tone, the stability, and the ease of playing. So I'm just scraping. I would recommend at this point that you don't talk to people, especially if you're just learning how to scrape reeds. Don't talk to people. Concentrate on what you're doing. Try to be as observant as you can. Everyone has tendencies with their knife, with the weight of their hands. Some people will tend to make little divots. You need to learn that about yourself. And if you learn in a slow and meticulous way and don't learn those kinds of habits, so much the better. But be observant. It will serve you in the long run. Try not to be impatient, and if you find yourself becoming impatient, go take a walk, go take a little break. Okay, so that's step 2, is scraping the tip. I'm going to check in my light. I can see that it is much more translucent than the back, and that's because it's a lot thinner. Okay, now my initial taking off of the bark, I think, created enough, I think there's going to be enough vibration with this particular piece of cane that I don't need to create a heart at all. And that's just because I think that the piece of cane is on the thin side. So what I'm going to do right now is just go to the next step, and that's clipping the tip. Sometimes at this juncture I'll kind of take a look and see if I need to scrape a little bit of cane off of the middle of the reed, that heart part. But I definitely don't need to do it on this one, and I can just tell by feeling it. A lot of this stuff is trial and error. Make notes. See what you do. Observe. Again, observe. Okay, now I'm going to clip the reed, and I'm clipping about 1 millimeter or so. And that's just to clean it up. It might be my final length, but most likely it won't be. So I leave it a tiny bit longer. And at this point, I just let the reed dry. I usually don't adjust reeds right away because they need to change, they need to rest. Remember that cane is an organic substance. Some pieces of cane are very soft, some of them are a little bit harder, which that doesn't really matter so much at this point, but keep in mind that they all have personalities and they all need a little bit of rest at this point. So I put it down and I let it dry. We have a rough scraped reed. As you see, it did not take very long at all, but it took some attention and it took some focus. So I would recommend that you apply those things and be pretty slow at the beginning and be as observant as you can about your own knife technique, and try to avoid making little tiny nicks in funny places because that won't serve you in the long run. And we'll talk a little bit more about that with the next section of this video, which is a reed adjustment video. Thank you.